It's never a happy tax day, but here's a question for you. What's the difference between the mafia and the government? The difference is when you pay the mafia your protection money, the mafia leaves you alone. No, wait, the real difference is that the mafia can actually run a business at a profit. All right, I'm kidding, but you get the point. How much of our tax money actually goes to the stated ends that the government tells us? My next guest says not much. That's why he thinks, like I, that the income tax should be abolished. Art Carden is an associate professor of economics at Rhodes College, an Independent Institute research fellow, and a frequent contributor to the Mises Institute. Professor Carden, it's a pleasure. Welcome here. Welcome to Freedom Watch.
Thank you for having me on.
So you're at home late one night, you're relaxing. There's a knock at the door. You answer the door. There's a guy with a gun. The guy says, "Give me your money. I want to give it away in your name." You call the police. You find out he is the police. He came to collect your tax dollars. You wouldn't let a thug do this. Why did we let the government do it?
Well, the reason we let the government do it is because generally we prefer going ahead and paying up to going to jail. In much the same way, if someone robbed my house, I would like to think I do a lot to stop them, but I might not because I prefer the world in which I don't pay the consequences to the world in which I do. You know, I go ahead and pay my taxes. I take it because quite honestly, I don't want to go to jail. I've got 2 small children at home. I have a wife to support. You know, going to jail is not a very attractive option.
All right,
I'm willing to pay taxes in order to avoid that.
How did we get to this point in our history where the choices are paying your taxes or going to jail? Stated differently, how did we get to a point in our history where the government acts as if our earnings and our property belong to the government, and it will decide how much of it will permit us to keep?
Well, governments everywhere for pretty much all of history have taxed somebody in some way. Indeed, one of the interesting things about the American founding and one of the interesting things about American history very generally is this is one of the first places where the idea of private property for the people who were doing the tax paying really took root and really ultimately came to fruition. And then finally, you know, in the 20th century, when we implemented the income tax and when the government started taking an ever bigger share of people's incomes, we finally got to this point where, you know, it's almost as if we work for the government and then we let them decide how much we get to keep. Instead of working for ourselves, it's almost as if we're working for the state and paying them for the privilege of not going to jail.
As a general matter, if I invest money with a company that is making money, I will get back more on my investment. But as a general manager, when I give money to the government, whether voluntarily or not, it consumes my money. As a general matter, what does the government do with all the money that we give it?
In an ideal world, given that we're going to pay taxes, the government would do things like help poor people. It would provide what are called public goods, which are goods that markets are going to have some trouble providing. In reality, however, what governments do is they take resources and they give them to special interests. The corn lobby, the sugar lobby, giant corporations that get special protections from the government, protections from international competition, protections from domestic competition, monopoly privileges of all sorts. And the kicker is these transfers ultimately don't materialize because people are going to consume resources in the political process,
right,
trying to get their hands on other people's money.
Is taxation theft? Legalized theft, but theft nevertheless?
Yes, taxation is theft. Taxation is legalized theft, but it is theft nevertheless. It's guys with guns taking things that don't belong to them. No matter how pure their intentions, what they're doing is stealing.
Got it. Professor Art Carden, thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure.